Alright, what is up, everybody? I am back. And we are going to talk a little bit about Season 2 of Rivals. Talk about why, to me, it's been a bit disappointing. Ultimately, even though I think this game still has quite a bit of potential, but just going to kind of break down some of my problems with this season. And some of them are honestly problems from prior to this season, but I feel like have gotten worse. Or have just become such irritating issues that it's kind of hard not to bring them up at this point. And I want to preface this by saying, like, I still am definitely very happy this game came out. I've had some good times playing it, and I'm glad that this game has at least created some competition within the hero shooter space, because I feel like Overwatch really needed something to push it, because I'm going to be brutally honest, I think Overwatch was coasting off of its past glory, and I think Blizzard sort of was just taking that for granted and sort of just milking the dead horse, basically. Well, not horse, but dead cow, for all it was worth, basically. And I think this game at least forced Blizzard to shape up a little bit and actually put some effort in. Try to actually pay a little more attention to what the community wants instead of doubling down on things that nobody asked for when it comes to their game. But, for me, I have a list here. I'm kind of just going to go through some of the things that I put on it and what I think they could do to address some of it. But some of these problems I feel like are kind of either inherent to the game, or I'm not sure if they'll be willing to change them, because I think it's very core to how the game works. But first thing is going to be the matchmaking. This has been a bugaboo of this game since it came out. Period. I think a lot of people have been frustrated with how this game's matchmaking works. I think as recently as Season 2, I think the rank reset, at least in the ranked mode itself, really, really messed up the matchmaking, caused a ton of issues in terms of trying to sort of create even matches, because you have so many people sort of acquiescing around one rank when, prior to the rank reset, they were very different ranks. This especially was a major problem at the higher ranks and lower ranks. I think in the middle it wasn't nearly as bad, but it's still problematic because, again, you get these sort of lobbies where you have people that are not quite similar elo, and yet they're being put together because the game thinks they are, but in reality they're not. And, I know this game probably has a hidden MMR system, because I know at least for quick play they use something like that. And to me, I get they base who you get matched up with, based on what your visual rank says, and that's sort of more like, how a game like Overwatch works. I've seen games that have ranked where there is a hidden MMR that you can't see. But to me, like I've said before, I just ranked it. The quality of games in ranked is not high enough in this game for it to really be, in my opinion, a good competitive mode. And I get they're trying to be more of a casual competitive sort of experience, but I think for me it's like, in my opinion, this game doesn't really have an excellent casual experience for the most part. I think there's certain things that if you're very casual, it's okay, but if you're somewhere in the middle, right, if you're somebody that's maybe not the most diehard competitive player, but you're also not somebody that's extremely casual, I think you're kind of in this middle zone where you're probably not going to have a great time with this game because it doesn't do enough to be a good competitive experience, and I also think it's probably a little too sweaty for very casual people that don't want to put a shitload of time into this game to get good at it. Because I do think this game has some depth to it, and there is some mechanics that you have to learn, and there is a learning curve. I think it is approachable, and it has some accessible features to it, but I just feel like this game is kind of trying to cater to both crowds at the same time in a way, and I don't think it's working. I guess regarding the rank resets, obviously at the high rank, Eternity is considered to be one rank. So if you're, 700 MMR above Eternity, you count as essentially the same rank as somebody who just got Eternity. Even though I think there's a significant gap in players. I mean, if you think about it, 700 MMR is like 2 ranks above, right? So you get these games that, and seeing people get reset from basically 700 elo above Eternity all the way down to Diamond 3 is kind of crazy. And then you see them playing in lobbies with people that are like, 700 elo below them. It just creates awful games overall. And it's the same problem where you have people that are like in plat and diamond getting dropped down to silver and bronze, and again it just creates the same problem. I think it's even worse because I think the gap between a plat player and a bronze player is even larger, even though I do think the gap at the high end is also very steep. I think for me it's like, there's so many other issues with the way the matchmaking works in this game. Just doing shit like rank resets is horrendous when you take into account there are other problems inherent that this game has that have not really been addressed, right? I'll talk a little bit about EOMM, which I'm fairly certain is at least in the quick play of this game, which is a big reason why I don't really like quick play. If I have to play this game, I prefer ranked, but I think ranked is still very flawed. It's kind of pick your poison, right? To me, quick play in this game definitively tries to get you to win and lose in patterns. I have data to back this up. I did basically a 50-game sample size on a new account just to sort of test it out, and I essentially came to the conclusion that the game was trying to get me to win and lose in certain patterns. It would consistently give me games that I was supposed to win, and then also give me games where the odds were basically stacked against my team from the beginning, and we were supposed to lose. And, I played with people from Bronze 3 all the way up to Eternity within Quick Play in the same 50 games. I had matches where there was a new account playing with an Eternity player on the same team. I saw crazy stuff. I had lobbies where it was like, I had like 8 Celestial players in one Quick Play match. I had games that felt more difficult than comp games. I had matches that were, people were openly flaming each other really hard in the chat like it was a ranked match, even though it was simply just a Quick Play game, but people were basically taking it super serious as if it was practice for ranked. And I was having matches where it was like I was playing on a team that didn't have a stack, and then I was playing against a stack. I had games where, and I've even seen this, where people have played in a stack and gotten matched up against people that aren't stacking. I've seen this at like the higher elos and ranked. I don't understand why that is. You would think stacks would get matched against stacks. That just doesn't happen. And to me, EOMM is probably something that is not going to change. I would bet that Tencent believes that EOMM is the best thing for this game. I strongly disagree, as I believe anybody that sort of picks up on what it's doing will not work for. I think once you realize your games are being manipulated for you to win and lose in patterns, I think it really takes away the sort of natural variety that you would experience in a standard matchmaking system. I think it creates this problem where you can sort of predict what's going to happen before it happens once you get sort of used to playing in the system. Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, to me, either use a traditional MMR skill-based matchmaking system in quick play, which personally I don't love, but I could understand it. Especially for a game like this, I can at least get it. To me, the biggest problem with it is I think it's very difficult to play with people of differing skill levels when you use, SBMM, especially in a public, casual match setting. Or you could just go for the sort of more traditional, and I've also advocated for this, where, and this is how games used to be, where you had sort of a very loose MMR system in the sort of casual mode, and then you obviously have the more strict matchmaking in a competitive mode, right? So if you want one or the other, you play whatever mode you want, depending on what you want, right? And it sort of gives you the really, really tough games if you want that, if you want more variety in opponents and opponents' skill levels. You play, quick play, right? This is how a lot of games for a long time worked, and then I think as of about, I would say maybe 10 years ago, I think skill-based matchmaking became very prominent in most games. And then I think as of about 5 years ago, this UMM system has started to become far more prominent as people have as big companies have tried to sort of find ways that they can use algorithms from things like social media. They can sort of incorporate shit like that into games to try to get people to essentially get addicted to it, to sort of psychologically manipulate people without them knowing, to play longer, to buy microtransactions, to do other things. Essentially trying to cause addiction because they think it's, they think it will result in more money long term. I just think it's disgusting and scummy and not shocking coming from Tencent, to be honest, a company owned by Tencent. And I just don't think this is something that's going to change no matter what. I think the game could be dying and they wouldn't change it because I think to them, they see it as the only option for the game. They think if they change the matchmaking system, people would stop playing. I don't agree, and I think long-term it's going to do more harm than good, but, time will tell, I suppose. So I'll get off the matchmaking. It's a huge issue with this game, and one of the big reasons I've kind of basically don't play quick play at this point at all. I'm going to get into, and I guess this is a balancing issue in a way. It's power creep, and this is something that I kind of talked about a little while ago, back when, in Season 0, when Hela and Hawkeye were very, very strong, and a lot of people basically commented that instead of nerfing these characters that were very, very powerful, constantly banned, instead of nerfing these characters, a lot of people advocated for buffing characters up to their level, and I thought that was a horrendous idea, as both these characters were already very, very potent, right? And I thought, why would you do that? Why would you want to make every character that powerful, right? I feel like at a certain point, you're just watering the game down because you continually, decrease the TTK, you continually shorten cooldowns, you continually add more and more abilities to characters, you just make it so characters can do a little bit of everything, and you kind of take away from character identity in a way, because you sort of make it so every character is good at everything, right? I think it really waters the game down. I've already seen this in the way this game balances, and I will say at least they have nerfed certain things, but the caveat is that, to me, I think they have buffed far more than they have nerfed things. I think they have also buffed things significantly more than they have nerfed many things. When they nerf stuff, it's typically very minor, very small changes. When they buff something, it's typically much more significant. I think that's why we've seen such a drastic shift, especially in the Season 2 meta. We're seeing flyers, and some people will say, well, that's good, right? We're seeing new characters, and to an extent, I can say, okay, maybe that's a good thing initially, but I think, the season's only been out for about 3 weeks. People really are not enjoying this meta. People are not enjoying the new characters that are prominent because a lot of them are very irritating to play against. A lot of them often are able to get value for very little requirement. They feel very cheap to play against. They don't feel like there's a lot of counterplay when it comes to dealing with them. It just feels bad in general, and this is something that I was very nervous about. I was even under the illusion, at least initially, that they weren't even going to nerf anything. Now, they have nerfed things, but like I've said, I don't think the nerfs have really been that significant, and usually when they nerf stuff, it's like, okay, we've nerfed 2 characters, but we've buffed 10, and that was essentially what Season 2's patch was, is maybe they toned down certain things. There's some characters in this game that are still extremely strong that have not been touched really at all for whatever reason, and I don't really know why. I don't know what data they're basing it off of. I don't know who they're trying to balance for. I don't know what rank. The problem with the ranked system in this game is it's not it's not really a bell curve distribution like Overwatch, so I'm not really sure who they're balancing for objectively, because in reality, the largest group of people are in bronze because of the way the ranked system works, where there's no placements. And so I'm not sure what the data is. I don't really know. Another issue, and this has to do with balance as well, is, again, these seasonal boosts, which I, again, called out like 4 months ago. I said, I think this is going to be a problem in the future, because I don't know... Some of these characters, if you give them a seasonal boost, they're just going to be far too strong. We've already seen this. I think a great example of this is when they buffed Hela recently. Since she kept her seasonal boost, she's 2-tapping people at basically any distance. As of late, Captain America obviously got a seasonal boost, so he gets 100 max health and 5% damage boost. This kind of put him over the top, because to me, he was already in a decent spot, but giving him this seasonal bonus, and it's not that the team up, I think, is inherently amazing, but giving him this extra health, he was already a decently durable character before. He was already hard to kill, but then they gave him this seasonal boost, and it's a case where I don't think he's like the best tank, but he's like one of the most annoying tanks in terms of you just can't kill him. And that damage boost at least made him enough of a threat that he easily decimates supports in a one-on-one scenario, easily. And it's like one of these things where if he jumps on your backline, both supports basically have to keep each other alive. Otherwise, he will kill somebody, and it's just, he draws so much attention. He's super difficult to kill. It doesn't feel like the Cat player really has to have good positioning, because it's just very easy for them to get out. We'll talk more about dive later, but this is just a massive issue that I think stems from this season bonus. The thing with Strange is I feel like they did nerf him to compensate for this bonus, but then I feel like, once again, if they end up buffing Strange again, which is very possible, is he just going to become, arguably more overtuned than he was before? I don't think so, simply because he doesn't have Gamma, but it's like, is he going to be strong, but in a different way, where he's tankier than he used to be? Maybe less damage, but he's going to be tankier and, in general, harder to kill. To me, these seasonal boosts are just such a slippery slope. I don't like how they work. There's some characters right now that are really strong without them. Wolverine, I think, was supposed to get one, but because of how... look, coming soon. He was supposed to get one, but I think because of how strong he was, especially in the last meta, they were terrified to give him a damage boost of any kind, because he was one of the strongest, if not the strongest DPS. Especially against tanks. So it's just like... To me, this is just like... This kind of feeds the problem that I think healing and damage are too high in this game on average. I think they don't need to go crazy, but I think if they even just tone down the damage and healing across the board by like 20%, that would make the game feel a bit better. I'll get into why, I think that would help, but I feel alt charge is a big problem. I think alts are generally building too fast. It's very difficult to track them, especially... at lower levels, I think, because fights can be so erratic and so different. Because people play so differently at lower elo. It'd be really hard to tell who has what. I think these damage numbers and healing numbers being so high has also kind of warped how the game is. I think because damage is so high in this game, it's kind of forced supports into this playstyle where instead of being playmakers, even though I think you can be a playmaker on support, I don't think that's even optimal at this point. I think objectively, the best way to play support is to heal bot currently. I think that that really is the best way to play support. And I think, especially in ranked with how the performance-based system works currently, that they sort of, I think, overtuned heavily going into this season. It's created this issue where supports have to heal bot to keep people up. And I think people have gotten content with being heal-botted and being pocketed hard to the point where I think a lot of players just can't function without a pocket constantly. But I think that's more of a problem with the game because, to me, it's like, especially if you're on DPS, and this is a big reason I don't enjoy DPS in this game, I feel like if you're not getting consistently pocketed, you will die a shitload. Because you are very fragile. You are very fragile, and there are so many different damage sources in this game that are so high from so many different characters. If you don't have a person pocketing you all the time, you just drop. But the issue is, supports have to heal the whole team. It's not like they can just only heal DPS. If they ignore the tanks will also die pretty rapidly. It's just supports obviously probably need to prioritize DPS simply because of the smaller health pools. But, to me, it's like, I don't think the heal botting playstyle is very fun. And I feel like that's kind of the trap that Overwatch originally fell into later on, where support kind of the most rewarding place, or not rewarding, but the overall most optimal playstyle sort of became heal botting instead of playing a sort of more balanced playstyle where you're looking to make plays, looking to set up stuff, looking to pick off targets too when necessary, which I think is how you should play support, right? Heal when necessary and also get picks when you see opportunities to do so. Be opportunistic, right? I think the general ranked format is just not good. I think we're going to need more hero bans. And it's partially because of the balance philosophy in this game to buff everything is creating these metas where there's just a lot of overtuned stuff that feels really obnoxious to play against. Hence why you need to ban so much stuff, because right now they're like, there's only 4 bans, and both teams can sort of overlap bans, meaning you have games where there's only 2 or 3 characters banned, meaning there's characters open that are just really, really not fun to play against due to their design, and also probably due to, recent buffs to some of these characters. I don't know why hero bans aren't at all ranks. I think that should be something that is inherently in ranked. I don't know why. I mean, gold, dropping it down to gold was a nice gesture, but I feel like, again, it's just, I don't know why silver and bronze can't have it. It's not like the hero ban system is so complex that I don't think people can understand it at lower ranks. I think inherently, I've said this prior, I think Elo is way too easy to get at lower ranks, and at high ranks, especially in this current patch with the way, again, the performance-based ranking system is on certain roles, it's arguably too difficult to get MMR. I mean, you have guys that are winning a lot, but still just losing because they're playing specific roles, losing more than they're gaining once you get to, like, Eternity, right? And I think at lower ranks, it's just far too easy to have a bad win rate and still climb. Which I think results in people essentially being kind of boosted, not necessarily, like, their fault. It's just the system inherently doesn't... It favors playtime over, winning, which I think makes no sense in terms of a ranked system. Smurfing, dude, what a huge issue. I wasn't sure how bad it was going to be a couple months ago. I was worried about it, but I wasn't, like, ready to blow the doomsday whistle, but Smurfing, I think, especially at low ranks and ranked, has basically ruined it. I do not... I'm to the point now where I can't physically play solo ranked at lower elos because there are so many Smurfs. It's just... It makes the games feel terrible consistently. There's very few matches that are ever evenly matched at all. It feels bad playing against some guy who's like a Celestial player in Bronze, and he's like, because there's no hero bans, he's just playing whatever the meta is. It's just cringy as shit. Them raising the rank level to 15 really didn't do much. Most Smurfs were already that level. You know, I would say raise it more, but I feel like Pandora's box has already been opened with that, where it was already too easy to level up originally. So now people have multiple accounts that are already high enough level, so it's just too late. It's just too late. And with the ranked resets that they constantly do, which I think they should tone down personally. I've been saying, I think, to me, 9 was way too much. 9 ranks was an absurd amount. I know people don't like the mid-season reset, and I definitely don't think in this instance it would be, they should do a mid-season reset. Simply because they reset people so much. But I think starting next season, I would probably do 3 at the start of a season and maybe 3 mid-season. But I would not go further than that. Because to me, it's like, I get what they're trying to do. The problem is it creates shitty matches. It puts Smurfs down at lower ranks again. It's like, I get they don't have a decay system. And they also want to try and encourage people who grind the game to continue grinding the game and not get bored. But it's just, I think they need to be far less prominent in this game, because right now it's like, I just don't see any motivation to play, especially if there is going to be a rank reset for this mid-season. Why would I grind up multiple, you know, why would I grind up a rank or 2 if I know I'm going to reset a decent amount, right? Why bother, right? And we don't know if there's going to be a mid-season reset, but there wasn't last season, so maybe there won't be, but we have no idea. They may say that due to the data, we need to do a reset. Maybe that's why they reset us so much last season. At the end of last season, rather. I don't know. I'm not really sure why, but to me, there needs to be placements, period. That's not an option at this point. I know it's one of those things where, and I feel like even, like, I think placements would also make it so you don't have to rank reset people as much. That would help. And I know some people are saying, well, you just want the game to be Overwatch, but I think Overwatch at least inherently has a better ranked system currently than this game does, and I think this game could heavily improve. That's why I'm giving feedback, but to me, it's like raising the level. I mean, would it even help? I don't think so. I did notice that with the practice versus AI mode, they heavily reduced the XP you get, so they're trying to make it so you can't just, like, go into practice versus AI and easily grind to, like, level 15. Probably something they should have done a while ago. It's probably too late at this point. I appreciate the attempt, but again, I feel like we already opened Pandora's box when it comes to Smurfing. I get they're trying to sort of... I think they're looking into banning Smurfing, or at least banning Smurf accounts. The issue is, even if you ban Smurfs, I do think people will just make more accounts, and it's so easy to do it because this game is on Steam. I think it's inherently very easy. I think you could do some things like tying accounts to certain email addresses and only allowing people to have one account per email address, but then you'd say, well, people can just make more email addresses, but I guess that's more of a pain in the ass. I guess just trying to make it more of a nuisance to do this consistently. I don't know. It's just rough. It's just bad in general. I think it's really, really hurt the game, and it's made it so I don't want to play solo queue personally because of Smurfing. I think it's that bad. I just can't beat Smurfs by myself. I need a team. Optimization. This game does not run well, period. I get it's an Unreal Engine 5 game, and I get this engine has issues, but it just does not run well enough for how it looks. I don't have the greatest CPU, and I'll openly admit that. I have a 6800 XT, which is a pretty solid graphics card. But in a game that looks like this, the game should not run as badly as it does, period. I mean, Overwatch, it's night and day. That game runs far better. Even at max settings, Overwatch runs better than this game does on the minimum settings. And I would even say, even though Overwatch is on an older engine, on max settings, it looks as good, if not better, than this game does graphically. I just don't get... I don't understand why the maps, like especially some of the new maps, I don't understand why they run so much worse. There's just such consistent fluctuation in terms of frame drops. I can't imagine people trying to play this on a lower end computer. It's just, it wouldn't even be playable with how this game is. I can't imagine trying to play this game at like 30 FPS. It'd probably feel horrendous. I can imagine. I do think this game runs okay on console, but I can't imagine it's a locked experience with how it plays on PC. I just think Unreal Engine 5 was the wrong choice. I feel like for most games it is. Unless you're creating like a very linear, on-rails experience with Unreal Engine 5. I don't think any sort of more open-ended, larger scale game should use Unreal Engine 5. It simply has too many issues. There's too many features inherent to the engine that are too heavy on performance on average, and I just don't really think it's acceptable at this point. I think they've done some small things that have helped, but on average, I don't think it has. The fact that I've had to sort of use, edit config files just to try and sort of stabilize this game's performance a little bit is kind of frustrating. I think this is one of these games where you basically have to use upscaling for performance. It's unfortunate because it feels like every Unreal Engine 5 game is basically upscaling is forced because of how poorly optimized this engine is. There's been very few games that I've really seen on this engine that have had good performance. I mean, look at, the Oblivion remaster. I mean, this game has stutter issues. It has just tons of optimization problems that I don't know if they'll ever really be fixed, and it really holds the game back. It just does not feel as fluid as it could. And especially such a fast-paced game, it's not good to have such poor optimization. It really, really, I think, just holds the game back, objectively speaking. So yeah. Massive TTK inconsistencies. So what I'll say regarding this is I think this game is still having netcode problems, still has hit registration issues. It's not as bad as it was a couple months ago. I think it has gotten a little better, but I do find that there is, again, and I think their servers, I don't know what their tick rate on their servers is, but it can't be great. It does not feel consistent at all. I still occasionally will, have packet loss issues that don't make any sense because I'll be getting packet loss, but my general average ping is fine. It's not like I'm playing on super high ping. I just don't understand where that's stemming from. I think because of this, I think it causes some engagements to feel very erratic in terms of, I think sometimes it feels like you just die extremely fast, like faster than you can even perceptibly deal with that. I think team fights in general in this game have an issue where they feel like they are very snowball-y. Either they last forever, or it's a very large snowball, and one team basically wins the fight very rapidly due to the faster time to kill. It's just like, there's not really a good balance. It's either team fights are very, very rapid, or they drag out for long periods of time. I've seen multi-minute fights in this game. It's wild to me. Part of it is because, again, I think ults charge really fast. Support ults still charge very fast. Not as fast as they did, but, when you have support ults that last as long as they do, and, in some team fights, you're able to build them in about a minute, especially in an intense team fight where you have multiple tanks on both teams that are sort of able to soak up a ton of healing and quickly give you ult charge. This game just has an inconsistency problem in terms of of how it feels, how fast things die, how consistent the hit registration is. I feel like even damage at times feels very inconsistent. You have these problems that arise where it feels like sometimes you have to have 6 people shooting one target to actually kill it. It's like, it just feels very, very inconsistent, and I don't think Overwatch ever really had that problem where it felt generally like the time to kill was kind of predictable in terms of how DPS fights felt. Obviously the time to kill was still fast in terms of DPS fights, but it felt there was more of a dance to it. I feel like, especially with the 250 HP characters in this game, they just explode constantly. It's the time to kill is so, I mean on a character like Hela, it's insane how fast she can pop somebody. She's just an example, but there's quite a few other characters like this that can, with certain combos, just basically insta-kill people. We'll get to dive meta in a little bit still, but it's really bad. Map design, I think a lot of maps in this game have an issue where I think and I will give the game's Destructible Environments credit that I do think they open up certain things, but I think a lot of this game's maps are a little too reliant on very heavy chokes, more tight spaces. I think naturally that kind of caters to a front-to-back playstyle. The only reason I think dive, again, we'll get into why dive is so strong, but I think because a lot of the maps have very similar layouts on average, at least within the specific modes, and yeah, there is certain maps are a little different. I know they've tried to take some risks with some of the more recent maps. I think the big problem with the recent maps is that they often run really, really badly. They have very annoying... I don't like the way some of these maps... these map elements move. I think they're very disruptive, very random at times, can just cause really... They're just irritating. I don't have a problem with them inherently being in quick play. I think that's fine. But ranked, it just makes no sense to have something like that in the ranked mode. It's just inherently anti-competitive, so to have it in the ranked mode is just strange. I don't understand that decision, honestly. I think a lot of the maps also just don't feel that different from each other, at least in how they play. I do think there's definitely visual differences, but I think a lot of the maps, again, play the exact same. I think there isn't enough options in terms of being able to sort of take a flank pattern as a team. They're just not porous enough in terms of, like, you aren't... It often feels like both teams are kind of just running in a straight line at each other because of the way the maps are designed on average. Not every map is like that, but I think that's kind of how, at least to me, they feel. I think also balance-wise, and this is another reason I don't enjoy quick play, I think third, especially on payload maps, is just too hard to capture currently. I think third, the spawns are often too far away relative. The spawn for the defenders is often super, super close, and the opposing spawn point is often just slightly too far away to the point where I feel like you have to win essentially multiple fights in a row without losing a single player. I feel like you have this issue where you basically have to win 2 team fights in a row. And if you lose somebody in the first team fight, you're inherently at a major disadvantage because the other team, even if you wiped them, will respawn and come back before that player comes back. So what ends up happening is even if you take a fight generally well, right? You wipe their team and you only lose 1 player, especially if it's a support player, you're in big trouble because the other team will come back and they will have a numbers advantage. And then it's like, to me, you almost have to be able to, because of how long people can stall in this game with ultimates and other things, and because of the sustain, you have this issue where you almost have to wipe the enemy team twice just to cap third in a row. And it's just very difficult to do that in an even match, right? It's very hard to wipe their team cleanly twice. because often you're having to use alts, and then guess what? They come back in and use alts, and then they win the fight, and then it resets, and then the cart moves back, and then you get put into the situation again where you have to do the same thing. And it's just, I think it's too difficult to cap third. It feels really bad, especially in quick play where you have to play attack or defense, and there's not, multiple rounds. It just doesn't feel good. Doesn't really feel fair, balance-wise. I don't know if it's a case where if it would be better for them to give the attackers an extra minute like they do in quick play. That does help a little bit. That gives you obviously an extra fight, maybe 2 fights if you Strange Portal. Maybe that would help. I don't know if people want that, though. I don't know if people want teams to finish maps. I think some people would prefer not to, because then, that probably would result in more ties. But to me, I just think right now it's too difficult to finish maps on average. I think a lot of maps are also just heavily defender-sided. I think often Last Point has high grounds that favor the defenders on some maps. You have situations where, again, the spawn doors are very close. Often the attackers, again, just don't have a positional advantage, so they often have to brute force their way through things. I just don't really like that. I think there's a lack of modes. I think right now, we obviously only have the 2 game modes, and every game mode they've added, I get, has kind of been to sort of cater to the casual crowd. But a vast majority of the modes they've added just have not been that good. I think Doom Match is the only mode I've played that I've had any fun really playing. I did not really like the Big Head mode. And what was the other mode where you could play like 6 of one character? That mode was not the greatest with how it worked. I would have just preferred, honestly, open queue. That would have been more interesting. I know some people would say that would be horrendous, but whatever. I mean, same sort of concept. It's just you can actually swap in that mode. You can't in the other mode, so if you get a character you don't like, then, well, too bad. I don't really like that they were removing maps from ranked, as this game doesn't have enough maps. I think currently there's only 9 maps in the ranked pool. I think they removed 3 maps. And I don't know their logic for as to why they removed some of them, because there's some of the newer maps I think are arguably worse in competitive, but they're in the pool, and some of these aren't. Which is funny, because I think the in-game tournament is going to be using the current ranked map pool for this season, but whatever. Yeah, I haven't really liked a lot of the new maps they've added either. Haven't enjoyed them. I think this game has a map design issue inherently. I think Overwatch maps are a little bit better, especially the older Overwatch maps. But yeah. Cosmetics. So I think with cosmetics, one critique I have is that I think it takes too long to get units, especially if you don't buy the battle pass. Units just take too long to get. Especially if there isn't like in-game events for them. I've got 75 plus hours in this game, and I think I've gotten 2 premium skins. It's this Hela skin, and I have the 2099 Punisher skin. That's basically all I've gotten. So yeah, it just takes too long to get stuff. Battle Pass wise, I think there's still kind of an issue where I think even if you do every challenge in a week, you could generally only go up about 1 page, which means the Battle Pass, even if you play even if you grind it weekly, generally still takes like 2.5 months to do. And I get you have 3 months to do it, which is nice, and I get it doesn't expire, but it still feels like it. I don't know. I understand why they don't want people to be able to just grind it out in one day, but I feel like it's still a little too restrictive as to how many chrono tokens you can get. I just think it's a little too much, and I don't really like it. I would say one thing you could do is just give people units for leveling up, but yeah. I'd be completely okay with that if you gave people 100 to maybe 150 units for every time someone leveled up. That way, every 4 levels, you could get like a recolor or something. So, because I'm level 35 on this account, so, it would have been nice. Then I could actually get multiple skins. I would have been able to get, multiple skins, but I've really only gotten 2. I feel like it's just too picky. Have kind of a problem with the way they've sort of increased the amount of CC, but also anti-CC within this game. I'm gonna be honest. I think Emma Frost, from a design perspective, like visually is great. I think she looks very cool for multiple reasons. I've never had an issue with how any of the characters look in this game. I think they all look great. They're very cool. I think a great adaptation from Marvel. I've never had an issue with that. I think the art team for this game does a great job. Objectively, I think they do great. I think they do a good job designing skins. I have no issue with any of the artists that work on this game. I think they're great. But to me, it's like you have these, and we're starting to see this, right, with the Thing, with Emma. We're starting to see these characters who are immune to CC, which in a vacuum is fine. The issue is some of these characters are often being given CC themselves, and in some cases it's CC that is essentially unblockable. So if you get hit by it, like, there's not really a counter other than just kiting, right? And in some cases, these CC abilities are very easy to hit. They're not a skill shot of any kind. It's essentially CC for free. It's the equivalent of in a MOBA hitting Q and clicking on a person, where it's like a guarantee that if you're in range, you will basically always hit the target. And I'm a little worried that in the future, if they continue down this path of giving tons of characters CC, but then, giving some characters anti-CC, we're going to have a meta where you're going to have to play the anti-CC characters, because there's going to be so much crowd control in the game that basically any character that doesn't have anti-crowd control of some kind is going to be unplayable, because they're going to be constantly stunned, not going to be able to play. There's going to be tanks that are going to be completely unplayable. Good luck playing Hulk in a meta with tons of CC. You will just explode constantly. It's going to be miserable. So I'm a little worried about their future design, because I sort of see a trend. And right now it's with tank characters mainly, but I'm a little worried it's going to extend to other roles. I'm curious if Ultron's going to have CC of some kind. I'm sure he will. I would not be shocked if he does. I'm just worried that we're going to start going crazy with crowd control, and the game's going to devolve into stun simulator, sort of like how Overwatch was, circa like 2018, right? Especially once like characters like Brig were pushed into the game. Next up, we're going to get to probably the biggest issue, the biggest thing people talk about on Reddit, and that's the dive meta. People do not like it. And as somebody who actually enjoyed the dive meta in Overwatch originally back in like 2017, I initially thought I would like it more than I do. I don't. I think in this game it feels far too just absurd. I think the mobility is far higher in this game. I think on average the durability is far higher. I think what that does is it creates this sort of low risk, high reward sort of playstyle with dive, where it feels like a lot of characters just have extreme mobility, which prevents you from being able to punish them for bad positioning. I feel like you have this other issue where you have these very high durability characters that also have high mobility. Venom and Cap are a great example of characters that are just extremely hard to kill and have very good mobility. So even when you pound the shit out of them, even when you hit them with CC abilities, it's like you have to layer CC on top of them to kill them. And it feels like to me that they're getting value without being very difficult to play. You don't really have to be that smart game sense wise and know when to go in and out of situations. It's not like playing like Winston in Overwatch, where you have to be very weary of once your bubble breaks. You need to pay attention to what your health looks like, because you need to be prepared to jump out at any time, right? In this game, it's like flying as Venom, stand there attacking people, take a shitload of damage, hit E, get a shitload of health, and then by the time maybe they whittle your health down again, you'll have, your ability to get out because it's only a 6-second cooldown. And to me, it's like either they need to make these characters easier to kill, or they need to make it so their mobility is not as powerful. Either they need to significantly increase cooldowns on mobility abilities, so you have to be more careful when you use it and be more mindful instead of just using it whenever you want as a get out of jail free card. Or there needs to be something, or their speeds need to be toned down so it's easier to kill them. I mean, right now, Spider-Man especially is the big target, and I know why. I'm not going to pretend that Spider-Man is easy. I don't think he is. But what I will say is he is horrendous to play against. Especially a good Spider-Man. He's a character that people hate playing with because he's so difficult to heal often. But again, because of his mobility. So it's frustrating if you play support to try and heal him simply because, again, he's flying around at Mach 100. He has a combo that can very rapidly kill people. He simply just does not feel like a character that has reasonable counterplay in terms of... Because his mobility is so wild, you would think, oh, okay, just CC him, right? That would be, in theory, would be the natural thing to do, right? Is just if you can stun him, you'll kill him. The problem is, again, because he's so high mobility, he is basically impossible to stun any consistency. It's basically luck. If you're banking on hitting a Luna Snowball on him, good luck. Good luck. If the Spider-Man player knows how to move at all, good luck doing that with any consistency. It's like, you're going to hit him maybe 5% of the time. And it's like, the rest of the time you miss, if you don't get significant peel from your teammates, he will probably kill you in a one-on-one duel. And I feel like it's gotten to the point where, if you play support, it is very difficult now to win duels. I think even last patch, it was not as bad. I think good support players could out-duel DPS, right? But I think it's gradually gotten more difficult for that to happen. And I do think peeling should be a thing within the game, right? I do think that should be something that is encouraged. But I think the problem is, we've played in multiple metas so far within this game, right, that have been very front to back in terms of how people play it. They don't peel because they don't feel like they need to. There isn't enemies all over. Usually the enemies are straight ahead, and both teams ram into each other, and that's how the fights play. But in this meta, it's getting far more vertical. There's enemies flying up above on walls, coming in behind you, slamming down, flying around buildings, just... There's people everywhere. The verticality is getting, very significant. So you have enemies coming from places that you don't expect. And I think people just aren't used to having to peel, right? People have we've gotten used to not having to do it, right? So a lot of people have sort of given the mentality that, oh, if you need peel as a support, you're just bad. But that's not really fair to support players, because there's things that have been changed in a way that they simply aren't able to consistently out-duel certain things. They just can't. They can't consistently... It's very difficult for them to beat a Captain America in a one-on-one. He has so much more health. He has a shield. He's very easy to play in terms of you just have to punch the shit out of people. You know? It's like... If you expect the support to 1v1 a Venom, then you're just a fool. Like... You know, you need somebody to come back and help. I think that, regarding DPS, dive DPS, I think supports still have some tools to deal with them. I just think the problem is you have some of these really strong dive tanks and dive DPS. When they all attack together, it's insane how fast you can blow people up. It's one of those things where it's like even the supports healing each other isn't enough when both... when all these dive targets are landing their combos on the same person, you're just going to burst through the healing, right? And it just feels really bad. It feels really, really bad. It just doesn't feel like there's appropriate counterplay. It doesn't feel as high risk. I don't have a problem with dive being inherently a high reward playstyle and being difficult. The issue is right now it is low risk. It is not challenging to play dive. You would think it is, right? You would think. Naturally, you would think that dive requires the most coordination, but with how the game is currently, and because it's simply so difficult to kill dive characters in a lot of cases unless they make a mistake. It's very easy for them to go in and out whenever they want, right? Without really getting hard punished consistently. Unless you're able to, again, like I've said, sort of chain CC. And we're seeing this with all kinds of characters. We're seeing this with flying characters. We're seeing, like, Iron Man, Torch. We're seeing this with characters like Iron Fist. We're seeing this with Spider-Man, Venom, Cap. I mean, there's tons of characters right now that just feel like... And we've almost created this meta where it's like you have to stack CC to have any chance. And that's kind of what, why Emma, I think, is such a big must pick currently. Because you need a character that can consistently CC stuff basically for free. And that's how she is. She's very easy to CC targets. So it's like you almost have to play her in a way. Especially against dive comp. You have to play her or you just get destroyed. And I don't think that feels good. Having to play a character, right? Or feeling like I get there being sort of... It just feels like it's one of those things where you have to play a specific composition versus, being capable of outplaying it even, if you're at a disadvantage, because it just feels like the deck is so stacked against you, right? And some of the flyers, the way, like, I've seen Human Torch players move is just wild to me. Like, a lot of people will naturally think, oh, play Hela, play Punisher, right? Because these are kind of the characters that were, at least in the past, the natural predator to a character like Torch. And in the past, they worked well. It's gotten to the point now that it's like, if you're playing Punisher, right, against, like, a Torch player, you, like, have to have the Rocket team up or you don't have a chance. You will legitimately get obliterated by Torch if you try to play Punisher with no team up. Because you simply can't consistently put enough damage on him, especially if he's getting the Invisible Woman team up. He's just too hard to consistently hit. It's like you're kind of just guessing because he can move so erratically. This was kind of what I was fearing, is that they would eventually buff the Flyers' movement speed and make them oppressive. I was kind of going back and forth on if I wanted them to do that, because I was like, well, that would be the best way to quickly help them. But to me, it was sort of like, I'd kind of prefer if Flyers were very high damage, but very vulnerable targets in terms of, like, being easy to deal with, right? I kind of would prefer if they were more like... I don't know, I think Pharah in Overwatch is actually a good example, because I think on PC, at least, she was very fair in terms of she didn't have very erratic movement. I think hitscan could shut her down. It was more on, if the Pharah player wanted to play Pharah into hitscan, she needed to play smart, needed to play behind shot blockers, put herself in positions where hitscan can't easily access her, right? The problem right now is these Flyers, with the way they are, don't need to play that smart. They can kind of just float above their team and just tweak out like a crack addict and get tons of value just spamming damage down on the other team. And it feels really weird. It feels really weird to play against, because the natural counter system in this game that you would think exists doesn't, at least in the current patch. It feels like there's quite a few characters that just don't really have a good counter. There's maybe soft counters, but there's... And I get people don't like hard counters, right? But it feels like there's some characters that don't even have a soft counter at the moment. There's some characters that it's like either mirror, or you just are at a huge disadvantage, or you have to hope that the person playing the character makes a massive mistake that you're able to take advantage of, that they basically misplay. Iron Fist is kind of the same way. I think we'll talk about the player base now. We'll kind of get over the general balance stuff, because I think that we could go on forever about that. And that's going to continue to, I think, change over time. But I guess that, to me, I think this player base is probably one of the worst I've seen in a game. Now, I haven't played a ton of multiplayer games. I mean, I've played a decent amount, right? But I've never really played a ton of team-based multiplayer games, right? I typically gravitate towards one-on-one games, or I gravitate towards more casual stuff inherently, especially as I've gotten older. I just don't personally like Uh, I don't like uber competitive stuff at this point in time. It just doesn't. I used to be motivated by it, but I feel like now it does. It to me, it's just it does more harm than good. It's not necessarily fun anymore. It's more frustrating than enjoyable, and that's just how I feel. But I've kind of been calling this game the League of Legends of hero shooters because it really feels like it. To me, I constantly see this just toxic, entitled sort of player base, and these a lot of people that play this game, they kind of treat it like life or death, even in like very casual settings. If you're playing quick play, people still treat it like it's ranked. It feels really, really strange to me. And I'm not saying to not try or throw, but I'm just saying, like, there's people openly flaming bad performance in quick play. It's just weird to me. I see people flaming people for playing more niche characters in quick play. It's just, I've seen people flame people for playing Jeff in quick play. It's like, come on, dude. It's not the end of the world if we get a Jeff player. It's whatever. And especially in this meta, you should be happy to get any fucking supports. Because in quick play, a lot of people are just unwilling to fucking even try to play a reasonable comp. And that kind of comes back to like the roll queue thing. But we'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, I think a lot of people in this game treat every match like it's life or death. I think flaming is a huge issue. People just often will just get so pissed off and just start flaming people. I think a lot of people in this game can't take constructive criticism, but are also incapable of giving constructive criticism. They can't be constructive. It's a lot of just shitting on teammates, calling people bad, your dog shit boosted, throwing out ad hominem attacks, all that classic online game shit. It's like really bad with this game. The egos of some people are just unwilling to swap, unwilling to change things that aren't working, unwilling to take any accountability for anything. You have people throw games and then blame other people. It's just bizarre. Some of the shit I've seen in this game is wild. I feel like they've kind of... I haven't personally, as of late, I've noticed that, people getting banned as well has slowed down. And I don't know why that is. Especially when this game was much newer, I would notice that when I'd report people, often I would get a message saying they had been banned or at least chat muted or something, right? Now, I don't see that as often. I'm not sure what's occurring with that. Maybe that's just anecdotal. It probably is, objectively just anecdotal, whatever. But there's so many people with fragile egos in this community. I think it's even worse on console. I can't even imagine how it is on console. It's bad on PC. I think console is a whole nother world. But yeah. Alright, we'll get into... I kind of wanted to go in a little more in depth about the performance-based SR. I mean, we've played these games before, dude. I get deja vu with this game with so many things because there's so many things this game is doing wrong that Overwatch did wrong originally. And it's just crazy to me that I'm assuming the devs never played that game. So that's probably why we're having the same issues. But to me, it's just, I get deja vu in a lot of cases. The performance-based SR system was not popular in Overwatch. I think they removed it in Overwatch 2. But it was in Overwatch 1 for basically the entirety of it. They did eventually make it later on, so it was only in Plat and below, even though I personally still didn't like that, simply because I felt it catered to certain roles more than others. And the fact that it was still in the game with roll queue especially felt really bad, because, again, it's one of those things where, again, it catered to specific roles, and it encouraged people to play the wrong play style because it essentially encouraged people to play for stats, not play in a manner that helps their team, play in a manner that gives them bigger numbers. That often results in people just playing more selfishly, and often prioritizing, again, their own numbers over other people. In this game, basically the same sort of general thing has happened where this system essentially has screwed over support players heavily. In some cases, also tank players, depending on which characters they pick. I know it's definitely worse on some characters than others, and for sure on DPS, there's certain DPS characters that are benefiting the most from this system, but it's far too based around damage, elims, final blows. I think it caters heavily to DPS because of that. It doesn't seem to value healing that much, which is interesting in a game that I think heal botting is very, very necessary consistently, simply because of how crazy high, the damage output is on a lot of characters. It discourages you from playing in a certain style. As a tank, it encourages you to focus more on kills versus making space. Tying up people as a tank is less useful because you're technically, even though you're helping your team in terms of you're drawing attention, you're not killing targets. And that's why there's some tanks, especially a tank like Hulk, is really bad for MMR gain currently because he simply just can't output enough damage to consistently get final hits, consistently put out, larger damage numbers. And then you have some characters like Torch who just put out so much damage consistently that they are artificially getting more MMR because of, how the way the character is. And obviously that's a big reason why the support strike has happened. I know it's not an actual strike. I get it's more of people just sort of showing their displeasure with the current system, and obviously it kind of relates to the toxicity and the flaming, people basically bullying support players, which is very common. And I'm not going to try and pretend like it's only support players that get flamed, but I will say it is very common that when a team loses, the supports get blamed. That is, on average, the first role that gets flamed for that, which is funny because in Overwatch 2, at least, initially with 5v5, it was the tank player. The tank player was the one getting flamed all the time. It was the tank taking all of the heat. And that's a big reason I stopped playing tank in that game, because I did not want to get flamed every match regardless. Like, I could have played really well, but my team just was not good, and they all blamed me for losing, even when, I dominated, right? Or I put up good numbers, and I gave my team a good chance of winning, but we lost a close map. I was just tired of getting flamed, right? Just for playing the role. And in this game, it feels really bad as a support to get flamed, especially when you're flexing, right? If you're flexing, especially if you're not a super comfortable, if you're sort of just filling to try and help your team, getting flamed for filling feels really, really bad, right? Especially when you have other players who are playing what they want to play and probably aren't even playing that well regardless of them playing what they normally play, right? It feels really, really bad, and I think, I think support players do have to have a skill set. Now, am I going to say I think support is probably the easiest role mechanically? Sure. But that doesn't mean they're all dog shit. I think people have this mentality that because support is on average the easiest mechanically, that it inherently takes no skill, and that I can pick any support and easily get to the highest rank playing support. It's like you do have to have game sense. You do have to understand when to ult. You do have to understand how character abilities work and interactions. There is still game sense. This game is more game sense than anything. This game is not the most mechanically demanding game to ever exist. I think in Rivals, game sense is even more important than even Overwatch. I think Overwatch is naturally more mechanically demanding than this game is. But game sense is still relevant. And that is still a skill set. Knowing when, the other team has ults, all this shit is a skill set. So simply because support players are, maybe not the greatest aimers, doesn't mean they're complete dog shit at the game and they suck, right? And that's not to say supports play poorly. Of course they do. Of course support players have bad games and they play poorly and they make mistakes, right? Everybody does. I think the issue is people often harp on a support making a mistake more than the other roles, right? Not to say that the other roles don't get flamed. That happens too. I'm just saying support, I think, gets flamed on average the most. And, to me, and I've seen this sentiment too, that it's like, well, people only play support because they're incapable of playing another role. I don't think that's the case. there's DPS characters in this game that I think anybody could play. If you can play, you know, I don't know. I mean, a good example, right, is everybody... I mean, Cloak and Dagger is a character that got so much shit from people, right? Cloak and Dagger players got so much shit. And sure, there was quite a few Cloak and Dagger players that, especially when the character was really strong, maybe got slightly boosted because of the character's power level. You know, to me, Cloak is a character that's more about cooldown management, more about switching forms, not necessarily the most mechanically demanding character, but a character that's based around game sense, based around managing cooldowns, constantly, you know, keeping your stuff swapping, you know, E, switch, throw your healing thing down, throw a healing field out, switch back again, use this when you need to get out. I mean, you're switching and juggling cooldowns. That's the skill set of the character, right? Maybe it's not the most mechanically demanding character, but if you can play Cloak and Dagger, I mean, you can play characters... I mean, there's quite a few DPS that are not that hard to play. You could play Scarlet Witch, you could play Moon Knight. Is it that hard to do this? Is it that hard to do that? Not really. It's not that difficult. So, you know, I see DPS players, they get on this high horse that they think, oh, my role is so much more difficult than your role that you shouldn't even talk to me, you peasant. You know, I'm so much better than you because I play DPS and you play support. That means you're shit, and I'm better than you. You should not be at my rank, right? It's basically that mentality, right? And, you know, sure, there are some mechanically demanding DPS, but there's a lot of DPS that aren't that hard to play either. There's a lot of DPS that are very forgiving. You know, you have characters like Squirrel Girl, Moon Knight. I don't think Punisher is too bad. Star-Lord's not too bad. You know, some of the melee... I mean, Iron Fist is actually not that bad. You know, Scarlet Witch is very easy, generally speaking, in terms of just knowing how to play her kit. Not saying that, you know, I think getting consistent value on her is a challenge, but I'm saying just picking her up and being able to do something, right, is not that bad, right? So it's like, just because, you know, support, you know, yeah, okay, maybe most supports can't play Spider-Man. That doesn't mean they're dog shit. I think that's just an overgeneralization. But whatever. I guess the last thing I want to go over, because I've been talking for quite a while. I'm an hour and 12 minutes in. I don't want to go over an hour and a half. I guess the last thing we'll talk about is, I think, and this is probably the biggest reason I'm going to argue, I'm probably going to heavily cut down on Rivals, at least until there's significant changes, is I think solo queuing is horrible in this game. I think due to the way this game works, where I think healing is extremely, like being pocketed is extremely mandatory, especially when you're taking heavy damage. Not being able to communicate, or not having people that are willing to communicate, is very, very rough. I think solo queue in this game, because of the way the time to kill works in this game, is very erratic. The games feel very uncoordinated. The flow is just all over the place often in solo queue matches. It just feels bad. It just feels bad, period. And I know these games in general don't feel great solo queue in overall, but I feel like especially in Rivals it feels terrible. Just because of how the game plays. I feel like the issue is kind of stems from a couple of factors. It's, like I said, the time to kill. I think with the way the matchmaking is, that doesn't help. You know, putting you against stacks, putting you against people that are higher ranked, having matches that are just all over the place with Smurfs. It feels awful. You know, another thing regarding solo queue is, because this game is open queue, and open queue has its pros and cons. I don't hate it, but a big downside of open queue is you can often get games where people just don't play certain roles on your team. You get games with 5 DPS players. You get games with a bunch of tanks. You get games where it's, you know, you have to play some weird-ass composition to try and make it work. And while, yeah, it's a little more interesting in terms of, like, you see more diversity in terms of composition, you don't have the stability, and that is the downside. You don't have the consistent stability of you know, you have people on the roles that they want to play. And I'm not saying this game needs to adopt 2-2-2 role queue. I think the queue times would be terrible. What I am, you know, this is an idea I've floated for a while, but I think some sort of hybrid system, some system that sort of balances role queue with open queue, something that is somewhere in between where, if you can guarantee me 2 healers every game, that would be amazing. I would love that. If you can guarantee that I'm going to have a tank player, as somebody that likes playing tank, I hate playing it alone. I don't want to play solo tank in this game. I want to have somebody else to play tank with so I can play off of the other person, right? If you can guarantee that I get 2 supports, if you can guarantee that I get a tank player, if you can guarantee a DPS player on my team, right? And part of that is because I want to avoid goats, right? The 3 tank, 3 support. But the other part of that is I think it would be good for the game to naturally have that as well. And then I think a 4th role being flex. And now flex would be sort of the... You can switch between roles mid-match. And what you would do is you would have 1 DPS, 1 tank, 2 supports, and 2 flex. And this would be 4 separate queues. So you'd be splitting the player base amongst 4 queues instead of 3, which I think would help with queue times. Because obviously, to me, I think 3 queues is just not enough. The other thing, okay, is naturally I think people would gravitate towards flex, right? Which would probably result in flex, on average, having the longest queue times. But I think what that would mean is much faster queue times for people that want to play specific roles. I think it would help with people that only one trick a character or only play one role. I guess one trick isn't the best term because I think hero bans do deal with that. But I think there are a lot of people who only play one role, right? And you don't want to have them playing another role. So the good thing about that is you would have them, again, on a separate role. I think you could have different ranks for each role. That way we wouldn't have to do constant rank resets. I think it would be a hybrid system somewhere in between the two, so you would get some of the benefits of being able to play different compositions as well, which would add some variety to the game, but also having more stability in terms of, knowing you're going to have 2 healers on your team every game would be really nice. So you're not forcing people onto the role that don't want to play it. You're not forcing people to have to fill constantly. While still having a flex role so people that are capable of playing multiple roles can also shine, right? I think that would be a great idea. I don't know if it'll ever be implemented because I think people kind of think it has to be role queue or it has to be open queue. I haven't seen anybody come up with an idea like this, and I just think it would be really, really good. I think, I guess people are okay with having both, and in essence, like, having both is okay because you can sort of jump from one to the other if you want. Obviously, this game doesn't have both, and I'm not saying it should have both, but I'm saying having a hybrid system I think would be good, simply because I think it would alleviate a lot of the frustrations. I think it would make solo queuing a lot better as well in this game too. I guess, in conclusion, like, there's just, I've kind of lost the motivation to play this game due to a lot of its problems. I think I'm gradually playing it less and less over time because a lot of these issues I just don't think have either not been addressed, or I don't even know if they will be. There hasn't been a ton of communication, and I don't think NetEase has done a terrible job with this game, but I think they could do better. I just don't think the communication is as open as it should be, right? I think they're a little too hush-hush on certain things. I don't think they've made drastic enough changes in certain ways. Like, I think often a big issue is they don't go far enough with a lot of things. I think they are too tame when it comes to changing gameplay features and changing things that aren't working. To me, it's like, I think drastic changes would be better for this game, actually, long-term, versus kind of trying to play it really safe. I think you're bound to burn people out faster if you play it too safe. I think we saw this with Overwatch for a long time, where they took no risks, and I think people just got bored as well. Even people that didn't hate the game inherently just got tired of it and burnt out and stopped playing it, right? And I'm just a little worried about this game going down that path, where I think this game is not going to die anytime soon. I'm not going to say, blow the doomsday whistle and say, oh, this game is going to be dead by the end of the year. I'm not going to go that far. But I could see this game gradually falling off to a point where this game has a more niche community. Maybe not a tiny community, but not massive either. I could see it becoming, and I'm curious in terms of, will the casual community in this game be the ones that stay around, or will the hardcores be the ones that stay around? Because I don't really know. But I could see this game kind of becoming like Smite or Paladins. I guess Paladins isn't the best comparison because that game was never this big, but I could see, and Paladins I guess is dead, but I could see it being like a Smite or being like a Heroes of the Storm, where the game gradually sort of dips to a point where it still has a dedicated player base, but I think it's going to be the gap between the people playing the game and people that try to play it is going to be massive, and I don't think the matchmaking helps with that. And I'm just a little worried that if this game shrinks, right, to the point where it's not really a true competitor to Overwatch, is Overwatch going to continue actually trying to improve their game, right? I think they've made strides, right? But I'm just a little worried about, us going back to, in a few years, going back to what it was where there was basically no competition on the market, right? And I don't want that. I really don't. I truly am glad Rivals came out, because I think if Rivals didn't come out, Overwatch would not have changed course at all. I think they would have continued doing what they've been doing. I genuinely don't think they would have made a single change. We would still be talking about 5v5 being bad, and yeah, I don't even know if they would have done the hero perks thing or not. I'm not sure. But yeah. What else? For me, I've lost motivation. Also, because I just don't feel that and it's not that the cosmetics are bad, but I feel like right now the only reason I'm really playing the game is to just grind challenges and do the battle pass. And to me, it's just, I'm only playing the game for a number to go up. I'm not playing the game because I enjoy it or because I want to play it. I'm just playing it to fill basically a quota, or just to, to do something, just to pass time, right? And for me, it's just not motivating. For a little while, I thought the ranked rewards would interest me, but I'm at the point now where I think ranked is so flawed, and a change, and this is kind of a nitpick, but I really didn't like this change. You can no longer preview the skin you get for getting gold, which I really dislike, because I would like to know if the skin I'm gonna get, if I even want to get it. Do I even want to try to grind solo, which is torture, to get the skin that I get at gold, because I like how it looks? I'm not gonna grind for a skin I have no idea how it looks, because it's like, okay, what if I grind to gold and it sucks and it's miserable and I have to play a bunch of games that are unfun, and then I get the skin and I'm like, wow, this skin sucks, I don't even like it. It's like, I don't know why you can't preview it, because you could preview it in previous seasons, which was a nice feature. So that motivation is gone to play the game. Most of my friends don't want to play the game anymore because of the problems with it. So it's like, I don't have people to play it with. So the game it's me playing it solo all the time. And to me, the only mode that's playable solo is either Doom Match or Practice versus AI, and that gets dull. It just does. Practice versus AI, I mean, the AI is not good enough in this game to be interesting to play against. It's just not. It's so easy to play against. It's just not a challenge, really. So it's really only meant for grinding challenges. So once you are done grinding challenges, what are you going to play by yourself? Doom Match? I mean, Doom Match is kind of a fun niche mode, but it's not something you can play infinitely, And it's just, I'm kind of reaching my end with this game a little bit, because there's just too many issues, and the game isn't fulfilling enough or fun enough for me to want to continue playing it. And I'm at the point now where I will probably go back to Overwatch for a while, simply because I want to try the new stuff. And from what I've seen, I think Overwatch would probably be less painful solo. Not saying it would be amazing. It's probably still worse than playing in a team, of course. But to me, it's like, it doesn't have to be the greatest experience ever. It just has to not be like pulling teeth. It needs to not be like pulling teeth. I just want a functional ranked system that gives me games that are decently fair. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. I don't think that's super unreasonable or like out of left field to wish for, right? I think that's what a lot of people want. But to me, it's like I don't know if there's any intention to change any of this stuff, and that's why I'm kind of worried because I don't. This game to me needs a roadmap. There needs to be a roadmap showing what they intend to do in over the next year. It would be good. I think it would set a lot of people at ease so they have an idea as to, okay, this is the direction we're going in, because I don't know where this game's going. Right now, I don't know. I have no idea. It feels like a car that's like driving near the edge of a cliff and you're like, okay, I don't think we're going to go off the cliff, but we are like getting close to it. And by close, I mean like I don't mean like this game's going to die. I mean more of I think we're hitting a point now where this game is not is losing mainstream appeal, right? And to me, again, it will kind of tell, time will tell if what the community looks like in terms of this game. But I tend to lean towards, I think the competitive players will be the only ones left after a while, because I don't think any game is able to maintain a casual player base for a long period of time. I think casual players naturally just gravitate towards other things that are new and shiny. I think eventually the hardcore player base will be the only people left. But this game kind of doesn't really cater to them, so it's interesting. It's like, and I get in theory why they do it, right? I've always kind of said that when it comes to balance, right, you should probably balance around the largest group of people, which to me is like gold plat, if we're talking Overwatch, right? That's kind of what makes the most sense, I think, personally. I think hero bans are a great implementation because I think they vary the game up. But, is what it is. Oh my god, I killed 700 bots. I can't move in the practice range. It's like I won. I beat the practice range. Okay. Well, I think that's a sign that I've probably talked too much. But yeah, hopefully Rivals can turn some stuff around. I think for a while I'm probably going to take a break from it. Hopefully they can do some stuff. I will still probably be following the game. I'll probably still watch the game on Twitch. I'll still look into it. I'll still watch competitive stuff because I think it's interesting. And I still think the game is interesting. It's just, for me, it's not fun enough to currently play. I have more fun watching the game than I currently have playing the game. So, to me, I'm not going to engage in something that is not fun or not worth doing, right? I think that's, at the end of the day, the biggest reason to do a lot of things, or to play games, is because they're fun, not because you feel like you have to, or that it's like a job or a chore, right? So, anyways, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. And I don't know when I'll be talking again, but that's about all I got for this one. Thank you all for watching. I will see you when I see you, and adios.